subject of minority rights has always been at the center of heated debates. With the recent strides and movements to advocate equality for all, we wanted to talk to someone who is actively engaged in the fight for human rights. Allow me to introduce a gem of a person who is doing just that. Assalamualaikum, Ms. Jatoi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. Ms. Jatoi, I would like you to introduce to our viewers.
I'm Barrister Benazir Jatoi. I work on human rights work, which involves a combination of court advocacy, so going to court as a court-going lawyer, and policy-related work around the issue of human rights, with particular focus on women and girls, but also minorities.
So, ma'am, let's start with the beginning. Where did you get all your schooling from, and how did you get into law, basically?
I'm not sure how I got into law actually, but I'm born and bred Islamabadi. I have lived for pockets of my life in different places, but basically from here. And I'm not really sure how I got into law looking back. I was keen to do it perhaps in my A-levels, and that's when I took up A-level law and then took it on from there. I did an LLB and then did the bar in London. But now looking back, perhaps the LLB I shouldn't have done and I would now recommend law students not to do the LLB, but to do a broader bachelor's, and then if they want to go into law, focus after that. Because I think what we forget as lawyers often is that if your focus is just on law, you forgot who you will represent, which is the rest of society, ordinary citizens. And I think you need to keep your field a bit broader to be a good lawyer.
And ma'am, what were your expectations before entering this profession, and to what extent were they actually doing?
I think my expectations was that it would be a lot more interesting than it is. So I think that's why my work hasn't been purely court going only, because I think that, or at least at the lower court level, perhaps it's very procedural, and I think we're taught to worry about what the procedure is, which is important to learn, but I think we forget the substantive law, the real meaning and the basis of why we do it, and the reasons behind it. So I think my other work allows me to keep that balance. So my expectations were bigger than they've actually been met, but I think I have managed, with the kind of work I do, to keep it interesting.
Okay, so you have made me worry now. Okay, so ma'am, what are your aims now?
Oh, that's a difficult question. My aim is to keep my head above water, take every day as it comes. I think also being a mother of young children, sometimes it's difficult to see yourself in a larger role. Perhaps as they get older, I can see that. But I think every day that my question to myself is, how am I making a difference? Whose lives am I impacting? Is there an intellectual contribution that I make? And as long as that is to a certain extent fulfilled, I am working towards a goal, working towards an aim.
So that's actually the most important that we actually need in the lawyers in today's time.
That's true.
So, and what are you currently up to? Any specific project or specific work you would like to highlight or would like to talk about?
Often it feels like I'm not doing any specific work, so I think that's the moment right now. Nothing specific. I think I'm trying to build up my practice a bit more, but it's not easy. And I think it's not easy because they're great lawyers. I mean, at least in Islamabad, they're wonderful lawyers. But also I refuse to work under anyone because I have young children, and I feel like in Pakistan there's no work-life balance. I worked in a law firm in London where it was a for-profit law firm where no woman with young children worked full-time. No women with young children worked full-time. And obviously, they made it to being partner. They were taken seriously at the workplace, and I think we just haven't got there yet. We feel if you're not there 9 to 7 every single day, you're not serious about the kind of work you want to do. And I think there are different ways of working. People haven't realized, and I think that the essence of creating an enabling environment for women to work has not been realized or even recognized in Pakistan. And therefore I work for myself stubbornly, which means it's a very slow process of building up a practice. But I do other interesting work. So I drafted the Sikh marriage bill in Punjab. That was exceptionally interesting. It was also really rewarding because it was tangible. I'm now trying to see if rules of business can be created for that act, because unfortunately that bill was made at the time of the previous government, and since then there hasn't been any movement. So though the law has come into place, there's no rules of business to actually use the law. And I'm trying to find some ways of creating a base in which rules of business can be established. And other bits and bobs I do. So that's.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Since you have already talked about your law firm where you've been working in UK, which is BWP, so my next question is regarding that. That how was your experience there, and what difference did you feel in yourself as a person after working there?
I also feel like it's great to do law and do the bar or LLM, whatever you do, but your real learning is on the job. And I also felt like my real learning was at Bates Wells, the law firm that I worked in. I trained there. So, the difference was that I think there was a slightly more, I shouldn't say this, but it was a slightly more professional and higher standard of working. And I really learned a skill I have been able to transfer into my work here. And not just in practice, but otherwise as well. But at the other side, it was purely law. And that, like I said earlier, is slightly boring for me, and I can get quite restless. So I think it's a perfect working environment in Pakistan where you can combine many things. I mean, of course, the downside is that you don't have a particular specialization, or it takes longer to create a specialization, but there's more room to build a hybrid of the things you want to do. But it was a very good experience working there, and I think the kind of skills that I learned from there I still use here. And I often don't see here in training in law firms. Here, unless you're sitting in law firms from 9 to 9, it's not considered training. And that was never the case there, where you learn so much. It was also really basic. So here, if you tell someone that for the first 6 months of your training, you'll only be proofreading, or only be learning how to create bundles, they'll tell you that's a work of a clerk. But that's not the case. And I think that, so yeah, it was really rewarding, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that.
And since you are working in human rights, so what can you do internationally in human rights?
Such a vast ocean of work, but I mean, you can do a lot nationally also around human rights. I think there's a buzz around human rights here. Whether how recognized it is, how far it's gotten, Pakistan has ratified a lot of international treaties under GSP+. So there is some recognition under successive governments that that human rights is an important part of peaceful, inclusive society. Internationally, of course, there's a lot of work, and if that's the route that students would like to go down, I would recommend working with national or provincial commissions on human rights here, or ministries of human rights here, learn how it links with Pakistan, and then see the opportunities that are global, international, for example, at The Hague or otherwise. But unless you know your own, you're not really contributing internationally. So I'm a firm believer that if you don't have a firm understanding of your own issues, your contribution at the international level is very surface, is very shallow to a certain extent. So start here and then move globally.
So, ma'am, what do you think that the current government can do or should do to uphold the rule of law or as well as women's rights and the Constitution?
Unfortunately, I feel so far, and it's very new days for this government, that this government lacks an understanding around human rights, around respecting or the importance of the rule of law, and upholding the Constitution and the Constitution's spirit. Whether it's because it's new days and they're finding their feet, I'm not sure. I believe it's not that. I believe they don't fully appreciate that in a democracy, the importance of rule of law and upholding the Constitution is important, not just for you, but for your successors and for the future of this country. I think the first step for this government is to recognize that, to get the right people around the table, that if they don't have the concept, they get others to appreciate it. It will also protect them. It is not the short-sighted understanding of it, that as long as we're there and we're in power, it doesn't matter how, because these are institutional concepts such as constitutionalism. And it will also protect them and it will protect the future of this country. I think this government has a lot of road to cover, because I think the first step is understanding this concept, appreciating it, and I do not feel that they're fully there. I think around human rights, if they will or do tick certain boxes, it will be because they internationally are obliged under ratified commitments that Pakistan has made at the global stage. How well they do to even if that's the reason you're doing it, will you create coordination mechanisms within systems within place here, mechanisms in place here to allow human rights to flourish? So when there's a violation, how do you enforce your rights? And that requires more than just the court system. It requires a whole mechanism, an inferral mechanism that needs to be established in place. I think there's some good work being done in the provinces. How fast they'll move, I'm not sure. And I think one thing about this government that they need to recognize is if there are good examples from previous governments, do not get rid of them. Build on them. I think that's a mature democracy. That's foresight that for now seems to be lacking. But I hope that I'm proved wrong.
I hope somehow our government get to hear this and consider this point. Ma'am, while doing research, I came to know that you've been working with the Braille books, which was for blind students. That is a charity organization, basically. So my question is, what made you work with that charity?
So it wasn't any kind of prophetic dream that I had when I woke up. I lived in Nigeria, Lagos, for 6 years. And when I lived in Nigeria, I volunteered with this organization because I met some very inspirational older women that basically started the Braille Center, and they provided books to blind students all over Nigeria. So this wasn't in Pakistan. And that's how I started working on this. And it was really rewarding, actually. During our time, 6 law students passed the law exam because of the Braille exam papers that were created through this Braille Center. But I was a very small part of the Braille Center. It was run by inspirational women that were dedicated to it 200%, that were foreign women that weren't Nigerian, married to Nigerian men that had made Nigeria their home and this was a cause and a purpose in which they believed and worked tirelessly, I just supported them to a certain extent. So I wasn't a huge part of it. It was them and I followed.
I really admire your work, and I wish that we can work something like this here in Pakistan as well, because I personally feel that such children are actually neglected here. We never talk about them. So I really feel that we also work here.
Absolutely.
So, ma'am, do you observe any change for the better after the establishment of Every Woman Treaty?
It's a positive change, positive move. Every Women Treaty has not been introduced as such. It's not a formal treaty as yet. So countries are now working towards trying to create this or introduce this at the UN level. And very dedicated and committed women in Pakistan are working towards it. I'm part of it, but again, a very small part of it. The ones that have the tirelessly work behind the scenes do not include me, but I'm trying to support as much as possible. I'm very, very small part of it, and joined later on once they had done a lot of groundwork. Whether it make a difference? Yes, it's a move in the right direction, but I think what we need to see is treaties help us, they give us a tool. Whether they bring that change, there's a lot more required. And I think what really makes a difference is if the treaties ratified by countries are recognized by your courts here, or recognized by parliament here, and that is still a disconnect, at least in Pakistan. Now you see judgments by the Supreme Court, also in the High Court, where international treaties are being quoted in judgments as Pakistan's obligations. And that is a move in the right direction, but it takes a lot of time. So yes, it will make a difference, it will make an eventual difference, but on its own, the treaty won't make a difference. A lot more has to be done for the difference to be seen.
So my last question is that since you have contributed in legislative work as well, so what is your stance basically on the punishment of death penalty? It's a very sensitive topic because there are many offences where our religion has also imposed such punishment, but still I feel that even if we have imposed such punishment, I don't feel there is any change in the number of crimes being committed or offences. So what is your stance on this?
I'm against the death penalty. I do not believe that, like you've said, that it will deter criminals. I also believe that our justice system is flawed in many ways. It's not non-functional, but there's enough flaws that the miscarriages of justice are very high. And one person wronged should weigh heavily on our conscience. And I do not think the death penalty will give us, because we look at death penalty as an end to a criminal offense or deterring people to an extent that they won't commit it. And evidence in countries around the world, it's not just Pakistan, globally show that that's not the case. So I'm very much against the moves that have been made, child abuse cases that took place, and then after that amendments to, I think it's a populist move, it's a knee-jerk reaction that lawmakers haven't thought through, trying to appease an angry public. And I understand their anger. I'm a mother myself. But I think that they should rethink the death penalty. The death penalty has not served the purpose it's supposed to serve. And for that reason, I think we should remove it from all our laws.
So do you think that we should remove this in the offences committed such as rape and murder as well?
100%. I do not think we should have the death penalty in Pakistan. I don't think it will deter criminals from committing an offence. I do not, I think also global examples show the same thing. And global examples also show that crime has gone down even in those countries where they remove the death penalty. Because I think the element of the miscarriage of justice is so great that just for that consideration on its own, the laws should be reviewed around rape and murder.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and for a wonderful conversation. And thank you to our viewers. And I hope that somehow through this interview we can make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you.